What if I told you the Roman Empire never truly died? What if the same power that crowned Caesars still rules our world today, not by sword but by system? From the blood of twin brothers came a city. From that city an empire. And from that empire a legacy that reshaped prophecy itself. They called it Rome, the eternal city. But eternity belongs only to God. So what made this kingdom so powerful that even Scripture marked it as the final empire before heaven's reign? Who were the men who claimed to be gods, yet trembled before the truth of a crucified carpenter? Why did prophecy describe their dominion as iron, strong, unbending, but destined to shatter? And how did a vision seen in Babylon centuries before Rome was born foretell its rise, its fall, and its secret survival into our modern world? The story you are about to hear isn't just history, it's revelation. From 753 BC, when Romulus slew his brother and laid the first stone of empire, to the day when Constantine saw the cross in the sky and forged a religion with an army, to the moment when the Iron Kingdom fell, yet lived on in nations, churches, and crowns. This is the untold truth behind the empire that changed everything. Because the Roman Empire was more than a kingdom, it was a prophecy in motion, and that prophecy is not yet finished. So ask yourself, when Daniel saw the image of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, did he see the past, or the world we live in right now? In the days when the tribes of Italy still wandered through forests and hills, when men sacrificed to nameless gods and the Tiber ran unbridged, two infants cried in the wilderness. They were Romulus and Remus, sons of the Vestal Rhea Silvia and the war god Mars, children destined for either greatness or ruin. Condemned to die by a fearful king, they were cast upon the waters of the Tiber in a reed basket. But the current, moved by unseen hands, carried them to safety beneath the Palatine Hill. A she-wolf, symbol of ferocity and survival, found them and nursed them until a shepherd named Faustulus took them in. As they grew, the brothers became strong and restless, filled with the wild pride of their mysterious birth. They gathered other outcasts, runaway slaves, exiles, and shepherds, and spoke of founding a new city where none had ruled before. But prophecy whispered that only one would reign. The struggle between blood and destiny began before the first stone of Rome was laid. And so it came to pass that Romulus slew Remus, his own brother, after Remus mocked the sacred wall he had begun to build. The ground drank the blood of the first Roman before the city even stood complete. Thus was Rome born, in violence and ambition, the child of both heaven and earth, destined to fulfill Daniel's later vision of a kingdom strong as iron, crushing all before it. From the ashes of fratricide rose order. Romulus crowned himself the first king and gathered his people under a banner of war and law. He taught them the ways of conquest, of oath and obedience, and decreed that every man must serve the city before himself. When he vanished amid a storm of thunder, some said he had been taken up to the gods. Others whispered he had been torn apart by the Senate he created. After him came 6 kings, each molding Rome like clay. Numa Pompilius, the peacemaker who brought temples and sacred laws. Tullus Hostilius, the warrior who burned Alba Longa to ash. Ancus Marcius, who built bridges and ports, binding Rome to the sea. Tarquinius Priscus, the foreigner who raised the throne higher than ever. Servius Tullius, born of a slave, who built the great walls around the city. And finally Tarquinius Superbus, the proud, the tyrant whose cruelty would end the age of kings. Through these rulers, Rome learned discipline, ritual, and ambition, each king adding a brick to the empire of iron. Even then, unseen forces stirred. Prophets from the east would one day call this empire the fourth beast, terrible and strong exceedingly, devouring and breaking in pieces. While kings reigned, Rome began to thirst for more. Its warriors conquered neighboring tribes, the Sabines, Latins, and Etruscans, binding them beneath a single banner. They built roads for armies and altars for gods, believing conquest was sacred duty. They honored Mars, god of war, above all others. Their priests carried spears into battle as signs of divine favor. The city's heart was forged in discipline and blood, a people convinced they were chosen to rule by the will of heaven. But heaven's silence deceived them, for though power seemed a blessing, it was the test of the soul. Rome's strength would become its own snare. The same iron that gave it dominion would also bind it in pride. In the heavens, the watchers saw another kingdom rising, one not of iron, but of stone cut without hands. The paths of history and prophecy had begun to intertwine, though Rome knew it not. In time, the sin of arrogance brought judgment. King Tarquinius Superbus, last of the seven, ruled not by justice but by fear. He took what he desired, silenced the Senate, and trampled sacred law. When his son violated Lucretia, a noblewoman of Rome, her death by her own hand ignited a fire none could quench. The people rose in fury. The tyrant fled. Thus ended the monarchy, and Rome became a republic, swearing never again to bow to one man. But in heaven's record, this was only the first transformation of the beast. For though the crown fell, the same spirit of dominion remained. It merely changed its form. The republic that claimed liberty would soon be ruled by ambition disguised as virtue, and the iron heart of Rome would beat stronger than ever. From the vantage of eternity, prophets saw the empire not merely as a nation, but as a symbol of humanity's rebellion against divine order. Centuries later, the prophet Daniel in Babylon would dream of 4 empires, the last one terrible, dreadful, and exceedingly strong. Its teeth were of iron. It devoured and broke in pieces. That vision began here, in the blood of Romulus, in the pride of kings, in the unyielding march of armies that worshipped war. What began as a city by the Tiber would one day stretch its hand across the world, crucify the Son of God, and crown its rulers as divine. Rome had been born, and with it, the final chapter of man's dominion before heaven's kingdom. Its streets were still young, its walls unfinished, but its destiny was already sealed in prophecy. The kingdom of iron had risen from the dust, and the world would never be the same again. The crown had fallen, and Rome declared itself free. The tyrant Tarquinius Superbus was gone, and with him the line of kings that had ruled for nearly 2.5 centuries. In their place rose a new order, the Roman Republic, a system built not upon divine right but upon law and balance. 2 consuls would rule instead of 1 king, each holding power for only a year. A senate, filled with elders and nobles, would advise and restrain them. The people, through assemblies, would have a voice in governance, or so they believed. At first, the dream seemed pure. Rome flourished under discipline and unity. Its legions defended the homeland, and its citizens swore loyalty to the Republic's sacred ideals. Libertas, freedom, and virtus, honor. But freedom without righteousness breeds corruption. And as centuries passed, the Republic's virtue decayed like iron exposed to air, strong on the surface, but rusting within. From defense, Rome turned to conquest. The Latin tribes were subdued, the Etruscans crushed, and the Sabines absorbed. But ambition is never satisfied. The Senate hungered for dominion beyond the peninsula, and soon the Republic found itself locked in mortal struggle with Carthage, the great Phoenician power across the sea. The Punic Wars would test Rome's soul. They spanned over a century. Oceans of blood spilled for trade routes and glory. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants, terrorizing Italy for 16 years. Yet Rome endured. When Scipio Africanus finally defeated Carthage at Zama, the once great city was burned to ashes. Rome wept not for her enemy. She rejoiced. And from that victory, a pattern was born. Nations conquered, people enslaved, temples looted, and gold poured into the coffers of the Senate. The Republic had triumphed outwardly, but inwardly, its heart had changed. The iron that once forged order was now the blade of domination. It had begun to fulfill the vision, the beast that devours and breaks in pieces, as Daniel foretold. As Rome grew rich, her citizens grew restless. The farmers who once fought for the Republic returned from war to find their lands seized by the wealthy. The patricians lived in marble villas, while the plebeians crowded in the slums, surviving on grain and spectacle. Senators bought votes, generals bribed legions, and the Republic's laws bent to the will of the highest bidder. It was in these days that men like Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus rose, crying out for justice, calling for land reforms and mercy for the poor. But truth in Rome was dangerous. Both brothers were slain by the Senate, their blood spilled upon the marble floors that claimed to uphold liberty. Thus began the slow unraveling of the Republic. What had started as government by the people was becoming rule by power. Prophetically, it was the spirit of the Iron Kingdom revealing itself again. Unity forged through fear, not faith. When virtue dies, ambition reigns. The legions of Rome, once loyal to the Senate, now pledged allegiance to generals who fed them gold and glory. Men like Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar rose, each claiming to defend the Republic while secretly seeking to possess it. Civil wars erupted. Brother fought brother across the Italian hills and foreign fields. The Senate trembled as its authority crumbled under the boots of its own soldiers. Rome's streets ran red with the blood of her citizens. No foreign enemy had done this. It was corruption from within. Julius Caesar, brilliant and ruthless, marched his legions across the Rubicon River in defiance of the Senate. The die was cast. The Republic that had sworn never to have a king now bowed before one in all but name. When Caesar entered Rome, the people hailed him as dictator for life. He rebuilt the calendar, expanded the empire, and spoke of mercy. But in his shadow the Senate saw their doom. And so, in the Ides of March, they struck him down with daggers beneath the statue of Pompey. More than 20 wounds upon his body. The man who had ended the Republic's illusion of freedom died at the hands of those who pretended to save it. Blood once again sealed Rome's destiny. Like the slaying of Remus by Romulus, brotherhood was sacrificed on the altar of power. In the silence that followed Caesar's death, Rome stood trembling. The Republic was dead, though its body still walked. The people no longer believed in laws or balance. They believed in leaders who promised peace through power. And from that chaos rose Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, the one who would soon be called Augustus, the first emperor. But before the crown could rest upon his head, the unseen hand of prophecy was already moving. For it was during this transformation from republic to empire that the stage of the world was set for the birth of the Messiah. The same Rome that crushed nations would unknowingly prepare the roads, the language, and the law that would carry the gospel across the earth. The Iron Kingdom, meant for conquest, became the vessel for divine purpose. Thus was fulfilled the mystery of God, that even the empires of men, built in pride, can serve the plan of heaven. Rome had devoured its kings, destroyed its republic, and crowned ambition as God. But in its darkest hour, prophecy whispered again. Out of this empire shall arise one who claims to bring peace, but his peace will come through the sword. The republic was gone. The empire of idols and emperors was about to begin. Out of the smoke of civil war rose a single man, Octavian, heir of Julius Caesar. The republic was weary, its people broken by decades of bloodshed. Octavian promised peace, order, and restoration. But behind his calm words lay the birth of a new throne. In 27 BC, the Senate hailed him Augustus, the exalted one. He refused a crown yet ruled as emperor. Temples were built in his honor. His image was stamped on every coin, and the people bowed to his name as to a god. Thus began the Pax Romana, Roman peace, a peace maintained by the sword. Roads stretched across continents, aqueducts carried water like veins through stone cities, and armies guarded the borders of an empire that reached from Britain to Egypt. Rome stood supreme, the world's beating heart. But in the unseen realm, heaven watched as prophecy unfolded. The fourth kingdom of iron, devouring and breaking all others, had reached its peak. The iron glistened in sunlight, but within it was pride, the seed of corruption. Man began to worship man. As decades turned to centuries, emperors followed one another like waves, each leaving behind monuments to his vanity. Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, names that echoed both power and madness. The title, Divi Filius, Son of God, became the emperor's claim, and the incense of worship rose from every city of the empire. Temples to Caesar stood beside shrines of Jupiter and Venus. Statues of emperors were carried through streets as living gods. To deny their divinity was treason, a crime punishable by death. And yet, in those same years, far from Rome's marble palaces, in a humble land called Judea, a child was born under Augustus' decree. A decree that demanded all the world be counted. The emperor sought numbers. Heaven sent salvation. The child born in Bethlehem would one day challenge every false throne. When Nero rose, his cruelty knew no bounds. He burned Christians as torches in his gardens, blaming them for the fire that consumed Rome. He sang songs of his own glory while the innocent perished. Thus began the empire's long war against the kingdom of heaven. Rome's greatness became blasphemy, its emperors gods of clay. As persecution spread, believers fled to caves and catacombs beneath the city. They carved crosses in the darkness and whispered hymns by the light of oil lamps. Fathers, mothers, and children were torn apart by beasts in the arenas. Yet their faith did not die. They called no man Lord but Christ. Their defiance shook the empire more than any army. Centuries later, historians would say that the blood of the martyrs became the seed of the church. For every believer slain, 10 more rose. They were chained, burned, and crucified. Yet their songs echoed through the Colosseum, rising above the roar of lions. To the Romans they were rebels. To heaven they were witnesses. And their faith became the unseen hammer striking the iron empire, cracking its heart from within. In the age of emperors and idols, the true God hid among the humble, and Rome, blind in its splendor, waged war against eternity. The centuries that followed blurred the line between religion and politics. Rome's priests became politicians, its temples instruments of propaganda. From Mitra to Jupiter, from Venus to Mars, every god served Rome's ambition. The emperor's image stood at the altar of every temple. Divine authority painted in gold and blood. Festivals became orgies of power. Priests offered incense to stone idols while slaves died for sport in the arena. Rome believed the gods favored her because she ruled the earth, but in truth, her strength was only tolerated by heaven, for the prophecy had not yet reached its end. Beneath the idols, the mystery of iniquity was working, preparing for the day when the empire would take a new form, when its religion would cloak itself in holiness while retaining the spirit of iron. Rome's power was immense, but her heart was hollow. She conquered lands yet lost her soul. By the early 4th century, the empire groaned beneath its own weight. Legions mutinied, emperors fell, and enemies pressed from the borders. But amid the chaos rose a man who would change the empire forever: Constantine. Before battle, he claimed to see a vision in the sky, a shining cross and the words, "In this sign conquer." He won his wars and declared the Edict of Milan, 313 AD, ending the persecution of Christians. The faith once hunted in caves now stood beside the throne. Temples of idols became churches, and the name of Christ echoed in the halls of Rome. But heaven saw deeper than men. For though the cross was lifted high, many hearts still bowed to idols. Pagan altars were merely renamed. Their spirits remained. The empire had knelt before the cross, but not before Christ. Thus prophecy shifted again. The iron began to mix with clay, strength with weakness, truth with deception, empire with church. The beast changed its form but not its nature. And as the sun set over the marble domes of Constantine's Rome, a voice seemed to whisper through time, "The kingdom of man has reached its zenith, but the kingdom of heaven draws near." The empire had conquered the world, but soon the world would witness its fall, not by armies, but by the hand of divine justice. The empire was dying. Years of civil war had broken Rome's unity. Generals rose and fell like waves upon a stormy sea. But one man, Constantine, the son of an emperor and a worshipper of the sun god, sought to restore the realm by any means. On the eve of battle against his rival Maxentius, the skies over the Tiber shimmered with light. Constantine looked up and saw a vision that would change history forever. A radiant cross above the sun, and written in Latin, in hoc signo vinces. In this sign, conquer. He took it as a divine command. The next morning, his soldiers bore the mark of the cross upon their shields. They fought, and Maxentius drowned in the river. Constantine entered Rome not merely as a victor, but as one chosen by heaven, or so the world believed. From that day, the cross and the crown became one. But heaven looked deeper than the surface, for what Constantine saw in the sky was not yet the faith of the heart, but the weapon of empire. In 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, declaring that Christians could worship freely throughout the empire. The days of persecution ended. The catacombs emptied. Bishops stepped from the shadows into marble halls. Temples once echoing with the chants of Jupiter now resounded with the name of Christ. But freedom brought temptation. Power seduced the faith that had once thrived in poverty. Priests became advisors to emperors, and churches became monuments of gold and ivory. The simplicity of Galilee was clothed in imperial splendor. Constantine himself ordered the building of great basilicas in Rome, in Jerusalem, in Constantinople, his new capital in the East. He gave gifts to the clergy and decreed Sunday, the day of the sun, as the empire's day of rest. Old customs mingled with new faith, and the iron mixed with clay. The empire that once crucified Christ now carried his symbol, but not his spirit. In prophecy, Daniel had foreseen this blending. The strength of empire united with the fragility of religion, neither wholly divine nor wholly human. As faith spread across the empire, so did confusion. Doctrines clashed. Bishops argued. Nations quarreled over the nature of Christ himself. To end the chaos, Constantine summoned hundreds of church leaders to the city of Nicaea in 325 AD, the first great council of Christendom. They gathered not in humility, but under imperial banners. Soldiers guarded the doors while bishops debated theology beneath golden chandeliers. From that council emerged a creed, truth perhaps, but also control. Unity was achieved, but at a cost. Faith was now bound to empire. Over the centuries that followed, emperors crowned bishops, and bishops anointed emperors. The sword defended the cross, and the cross justified the sword. It was no longer a movement of the spirit, but an institution of the state. Rome had baptized herself, but her soul remained unchanged. The beast had learned to wear a halo. While the church in Rome gained power, the empire itself began to rot from within. Corruption spread through its armies and courts. Barbarian tribes, Goths, Vandals, Huns, pressed upon its borders. Once proud legions fled. Emperors rose and fell like shadows. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Rome was sacked by Alaric and his Visigoths. The eternal city burned. Temples crumbled, treasures were looted, and the world gasped as the iron beast bled. To the pagans, it was proof that abandoning their gods had doomed them. To the Christians, it was judgment, a divine warning that no earthly kingdom, however mighty, can stand forever. By 476 AD, the Western Empire was gone. The last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a child, was deposed by a barbarian general. The city of Romulus, which had ruled the world for 1,000 years, became a ruin of marble and memory. But prophecy had spoken. The iron would not vanish. It would divide and live on in other forms. Though the Western Empire fell, its spirit endured. In the East, the Byzantine Empire rose, the continuation of Roman law and power under new robes. In the West, the Church of Rome became the new throne, wearing the mitre instead of the crown. Kings would kneel before popes, nations would bear Latin law, and the shadow of Rome would stretch across centuries. The Iron Kingdom had not died, it had merely changed shape. Its legions became missionaries, its emperors became pontiffs, and its banners bore crosses instead of eagles. The same ambition that once sought to rule the world by force now sought to rule it by faith, but the faith of empire, not of the spirit. And yet, within this corruption, the divine plan still worked unseen. For even through Rome's pride, the word of God spread to every land it once conquered by war. The roads of the Caesars became the roads of the gospel. The same empire that nailed Christ to the cross carried his message to the ends of the earth. So prophecy moved toward its final fulfillment. The iron mixed with clay, but they shall not cleave one to another, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. The empire of men had risen, knelt, and fallen. But the kingdom of heaven was drawing near, unseen, unstoppable, eternal. The year was 476 AD. The city of Rome, once the jewel of the world, stood silent. Weeds grew among the ruins of temples. Statues lay broken upon the ground. The last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, had been cast aside by a barbarian warlord named Odoacer. And so, after 12 centuries of conquest, Rome's earthly throne was empty. The senators hid in marble villas, the legions vanished, and the cry of empire faded into memory. But prophecy was not finished. For Daniel had seen the image: gold, silver, bronze, and finally iron mixed with clay. A kingdom divided, strong and weak, enduring yet unstable. The body of Rome was broken, but its spirit still breathed through its fragments. The Goths, Franks, Vandals, Lombards, and others carved her lands into their own kingdoms. Yet they all carried Rome's laws, Rome's roads, Rome's tongue, and Rome's dream to rule the world. The empire had fallen outwardly, but inwardly, it lived on through those who inherited her mantle. In the vacuum of fallen kings, another throne rose, not of marble, but of faith. The Bishop of Rome, once a humble shepherd of the persecuted church, now sat upon the seat of influence. The empire's temples became cathedrals, and its Caesars were replaced by popes. From this throne came decrees that shaped nations. Crowns were placed upon emperors in the name of God, yet the power behind them was still Rome. Thus was born the Holy Roman Empire, neither truly holy, nor Roman, nor eternal, but the rebirth of the same dominion under a sacred disguise. The cross became a scepter, the altar became a throne, and the nations that bowed to its blessing found themselves woven again into the web of the old empire's reach. Prophecy whispered. The iron had mixed with clay. The power of empire fused with the softness of religion. Even as empires rose and fell, Rome's shadow remained, stretching across cathedrals, councils, and crowns. As centuries passed, the dream of universal dominion shifted form. The Eastern Empire, Byzantium, shone for a time, preserving Rome's art, science, and law until 1453, when it fell to the Ottomans. Yet even then, Rome's heritage continued in the nations that grew from her ashes. From her language came Latin Europe. From her roads, the trade of nations. From her law, the order of kingdoms. Even the lands across the ocean, discovered and conquered centuries later, were claimed under banners bearing Latin crosses and Roman eagles. Spain, France, and Britain, heirs of Rome's culture, carried her ambition to every continent. And as the map of the world turned red and gold, prophecy stirred again. For though the empire had been divided, its heart, the will to dominate, had never died. The nations of the West still bore the image of their mother, proud, powerful, and blind to their own reflection. The age of swords gave way to the age of statesmen, but Rome's foundation endured. Republics rose in her image, Parliaments and senates echoed her name. The Roman law still governed courts. The Latin tongue still named the sciences. Even the calendar followed Caesar's order. But prophecy reveals that the iron never ceased to rule, it only changed shape. The modern world, though clothed in democracy and freedom, still moves under the same system Rome birthed. A world joined by roads, bound by law, ruled by commerce and might. Even religion, reformed and divided, carries traces of Rome's hand. Its symbols, titles, and rituals bear the memory of empire. The beast of iron became invisible, not slain, but disguised. Its power became political, spiritual, and economic, global rather than territorial. In the vision of Revelation, John saw a woman riding a scarlet beast, arrayed in purple and gold, drunk with the blood of saints, and upon her forehead was written mystery, Babylon the Great. And many have wondered, did Rome ever truly fall, or did it only change its garments? The crown of empire was not buried. It was hidden beneath new names and nations. From the ruins of antiquity to the skyscrapers of the present, the prophecy of Daniel still stands. The iron and clay of the statue remain. Nations divided yet bound by fragile alliances. Europe rises and falls, unions form and fracture, kings and presidents take the stage. All heirs of Rome's divided legacy. But Daniel's vision did not end with iron. He saw a stone cut without hands, a kingdom not made by man, striking the image and breaking it to dust. That stone is the eternal kingdom of heaven, the reign of the Messiah who shall rule in righteousness forever. The Roman Empire, from its founding in 753 BC to its fall in 476 AD, from the Caesars to the cathedrals, from the sword to the system, stands as the final empire of man before the return of divine rule. Its legacy lives in law, architecture, government, and belief, but its destiny is dust. The prophets declared it, history confirmed it, and the Spirit still whispers it. The kingdoms of this world shall become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. Thus ends the age of iron. And though its shadow still moves across the earth, its time is nearly spent. For no empire of man can stand against the kingdom that is not of this world.